aside this area, there are many parts of the organization that we do not really understand. And the only way we can understand it to drive the decisions that we make is to be able to build a data-driven organization, which is we must have organizational systems where we can understand what is happening within the organization and use that data to make the right decisions. The next session will be having, which is our final session for the day. We'll be looking at how to build the foundations for a data-driven organization. The speaker for this session, or the facilitator for this session, is a senior business and HR professional with experience in telecommunications, in manufacturing, in FMCGs, all across the continent. So she's a Pan-African professional, if I'll put it that way. She's held HR leadership and management positions at Airtel Africa, at the Nigerian Bottling Company, the Heineken Company, Netherlands, and is currently the HR director at Nigerian Breweries. She has a broad understanding across various domains within human resources, including leadership development, change management, process improvement, inclusive of organizational diversity. It's my pleasure to welcome again. She was at the last the HR Tech Nigeria conference that was during the lockdown. It's my pleasure to welcome again Grace Omo-Lamai, the HR Director, Nigeria Breweries. Good morning, or it's now in afternoon everywhere. So good afternoon, except in Ghana. Ghana is still in morning, but good afternoon to you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And you?
I'm good, thank you. I hope you can hear me, you can see me, and you can see my screen.
Yes, loud and clear. You can see the slides as well.
Thank you very much. So indeed, good day to everyone, because I see that really we have people joining from all over Africa and even outside of Africa. So fantastic, and it's an honor and a pleasure for me to be here to be talking about this. And I would like to stand on existing protocols. I've heard practically all the speakers since morning, and everything that they've been talking about have just been building one on the other, and they've been fantastic and very insightful. In fact, Peter taught me something new, presenteeism. I'm not gonna lie if I say that that's the first time I'm hearing about that. So really great job. So the beauty again about coming last is that everybody has said everything. So let's see how we go. So we're going to be talking about how we build the foundations of a data-driven organization. Yeah. And so indeed, we've been talking all day about data. But then why is data so important? By now, you all know that it's almost like oxygen now. What can I say? It has become a key factor for helping every organization to thrive in this age that we are. Organizations before, I remember in my early days in my career, they would talk about scenario building, talk about the assumptions and all of that, but assumptions are not enough anymore. We have to be able to trust our own facts, and where we get those facts from becomes very important, because then it is the data that we need, and it is the compass that's going to lead the organization, as it were, through these very volatile, complex, really difficult times that are ever evolving. Is like going through a slippery slope. So for organizations, then data becomes very important. It's like the rudder for a ship that's going to steer it to where it's going to go. So data, just like so many other assets that organizations may have, right, becomes a strategic asset in itself. How we manage the data, how we use the data, what we get out of that data becomes very important. You have just heard Peter talk about mental illness. A lot of, or mental well-being, mental wellness, a lot of the research, the insights that came out of the things he presented is because somewhere along the line, data was being gathered. And so all of that came to become meaningful information and insights that are coming out today and we're learning about. So a data-driven organization, therefore, is one that has established a total framework and culture Yes, culture, where data is priced and effectively utilized to make decisions across the organization. So the kind of culture that we have can either hinder or help us to have a data-driven organization. So again, culture comes in there, and as an HR community, we're very familiar with culture. We know that when it comes to culture, we are sort of like the custodians. We may not be the ones that really drive the culture on our own, but we are the custodians of organizational culture. So data comes in here as well. So data-driven organizations do certain things and they do them well. For example, they recognize the importance of collecting raw data, but they also understand that they shouldn't make business decisions using raw data alone. So they collect the data, they analyze the data, and they get insights from the data that then help them to address business problems. It also helps them, very importantly, particularly in these times, to identify new areas of growth and so drive profitability. And oftentimes, data helps them to look at what consumers are doing. What are the trends? Where are we going to? Where is our business or our product relevant? So how can we capture the opportunities that are in there? It is only through well curated, so to speak, data that they can really take advantage and drive future growth in their organizations. And also, data-driven organizations outperform. Of course, research and studies and reports have shown that organizations that are data-driven outperform their competitors by 6% in profitability and 5% in productivity. This is a research that was done by PwC as of 2021, and it had to do with analytics and AI transformation. So data is important, and how we use data becomes very important. And organizations who are data-driven know where to place the data. They make sure that the data is at the front and the center of the work that they do. That means that they make sure that people who need to use this data leverage the data to make the critical decisions at the point where it matters most. They have access to this data, and they utilize the data effectively, and they use it to generate insights that are important for growth. And also, they use data to drive change, to drive innovation, the way their products are perceived, the way they socialize their products with their consumers, and they also use that to recruit new customers, as it were. And here I've shown some examples of data-driven organizations. Netflix, you heard Peter talk a lot about Netflix. He kept on referring to something that he watched on Netflix, something that he saw on Netflix. And it's no surprise then, because that we're mentioning Netflix here as one of the foremost data-driven organizations, because they have been able to utilize the power of their data to run predictive analysis. And by doing that, they've been able to learn what exactly their customers or consumers would want to see. And they've analyzed tons and tons of data, and this has resulted in why they make programs that people really want. And that's why Netflix became so popular in so short a time. And for us here in Nigeria, for example, it's not uncommon to hear people say things like, oh, I don't do DSTV anymore. I have a Netflix subscription. And then, of course, we have Google. We have the likes of Uber as well, and the likes of Coca-Cola. I'm not going to read what it is that they've done. I've provided the slides, so hopefully you will get the slides and you'll be able to read some of what these data-driven organizations have been able to do, and how that has helped them to grow their businesses, to grow productivity, grow profitability, and most importantly, impact their consumers. So, talking about data-driven organizations, there are some foundations that we need to take into consideration. And here, when you look again on the internet, you would see tons and tons of things that we need to do, or we need to make sure are in place for an organization to become data-driven. But here in this discourse, I've tried to just narrow it down to 3. And here, first of all, it's governance. How do we ensure that we have data governance in our organization? And the second one is about creating a data-driven culture. I said it earlier, that culture then becomes very important. And having done that or established that, how do we grow data science and improve the quality of data? Because of course, if we put in, you know the proverbial saying, garbage in, garbage out. We put in the right data, we get the right insights out. We put in the wrong data, and that just leads us down the wrong way. So it becomes very important to continue to improve the data quality. So when we unpack these, therefore, starting with the governance, embedding business data ownership, we want to make sure that business users own the business data. Who is using this data? Who understands the data? Who should own it? Who can validate it? We want to make sure that the data quality can be guaranteed. We want to make sure that what goes in there is the accurate thing, because that then becomes the foundation, as it were, of what then gets spewed out in terms of insights. So there has to be accountability from the data owners. We also have to make sure that we have in place data standards and policies. Who can use data? Who is responsible for data? Who has access to this data? What is the level of access that individuals have? Okay, and then of course, who are the people that we need to grant access to in terms of data? It is not uncommon, for example, in large organizations like mine, that sometimes people are asking for certain things, but yet these things exist in certain domains. But just because that access is not there, people do not realize that it is there, and then they do double work. And oftentimes that leads to burnout. And again, people start to complain about work-life balance or even mental wellness, because they just find themselves repeating and doing the same thing over and over again. That really has to do with who has access to the data and how much of this data is shared with the community. So the governance has to be there, and it has to be clearly known and understood by all. Now, the second cornerstone
is about... Just a minute as we go on.
Yes,
your slides are not moving. So we're still on the first screen here. So we can't see every other slide after that.
Okay, so let me...
Okay, I think it's changed now, yes.
It has changed now?
It has changed now, yes.
Okay, so I think the network problem,
No
right?
problem. Okay,
so are you seeing, where are we now?
Create a data-driven culture, yes.
Fantastic. Please let me know if the slides are not advancing. Could just be
No
a
problem.
lag in stuff. So, you know, I said earlier about creating a data-driven culture. Now here, there are 5 key points to note. One is that we want to make it clear what it means to be data-driven, right? And it starts from the top. As you well know, for things, for culture really to move or to be formed, or whatever it is that we say the culture of the organization is, it has to come from the top. The tone has to be set from the top, and then it goes down. So it's not, in this case, it's not a democracy, but the top has to lead and show the example, and then it's going to permeate in the rest of the organization. Secondly, we also want to build data literacy. I remember when we started on our digital transformation journey a few years ago, one of the major things that we wanted to do was to see how we could get everybody to speak the same basic language when it comes to digital, and to understand why we were investing so much in digital. So we now started coming up with digital trainings for different levels, different groups, different functions, specific functions. But we also told ourselves that if we did not start from the top to train people to speak that same language that the person on the shop floor would speak, because he needs to speak that language to do his job, then we have failed. So we embarked on this big digital learning development program. And now we have a digital program which is called DigiFit. And we have different levels, we have different people at different levels, and we have teams competing amongst themselves, really, you know, to become even more digitally fit, as it were, in the organization. So that becomes very important, because without that, then people can't utilize the data that will be available there. You want to also embrace new technology, but of course it has to be technology that is purpose-built, what is important for you, for your own purpose, for what you want to use it for. It doesn't mean then that every new kid on the block in terms of technology you take, but rather what is necessary for you. That is what you want to get out there. And then of course you want to make sure that once you have data in, you want to democratize it. You want to make sure people are able to find it, people are able to access it, and that this data is interoperable. That is, you can integrate from one maybe system to the other seamlessly, where you may have a few systems linking together. And you want to make data reusable so that you don't have to keep on doing the same thing when you actually have it already there. And one important thing is also to get data experts on board, and that's where the HR community comes in. It becomes very difficult to find the critical capability that you need when it comes to finding the experts on board. And there HR has to get creative and create an enabling environment for such experts to want to come to your organization, particularly an organization like mine that is over 75 years old. People might consider us as being maybe old, slow, and all of that, but with building digital, with making it more digital, then people will be attracted to come into the organization. Now, the third cornerstone is how we can grow data science and so improve the data quality. I hope the slides are moving. Yeah. So,
I don't know if it has changed from the last one, but it's still on creates a data-driven culture. And also, can you put it in the presentation mode so that we can see it full screen?
It's in presentation mode. Let me do it again. Okay, so maybe as I move from one slide to the other, I'll go off and come back on again. Guys, you bear with me.
Okay. No problem.
So we have to improve the data quality. So we have to do routine data checks and we have to clean it routinely. We have to revise the quality of our data, and then we have to make sure that there's data integrity all the way. That's why it becomes important to have the data experts on board. And then, of course, we have to also grow the data science skills. All of these things really fall within the purview of the around this area. So now I'm going to move to the next section, which is now focused on HR. Again, I'm going to ask if my slide has changed. If not, then I end slideshow and then I come back again. Okay, has it changed?
Yes, it has changed now. Built in a data-driven HR organization.
Exactly. Has it changed now to the case for HR?
No, it hasn't.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so there's a lag. So
yes, it's there now.
Okay. I hope it's on slideshow.
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. So then, looking at all of these things that I've talked about so far, it would seem like this is just a total business thing, has nothing to do with people, nothing to do with HR, but it's not the case. HR, as it were, as professionals, we really also are eager to upskill, because a lot of these things that have been mentioned by the different speakers today cannot be achieved if we in HR are not already data driven. We need to be able to key into this to be able to deliver sustainable value to the business, or support the business to deliver its value, as it were. So we too, we have to continue to evolve, both technically and non-technically, so that as HR professionals, we can master our own skills even better. The speaker before Peter talked about some of the key HR skills that become very important in the future. And this is all driven by the influence of data. I'm going to move to the next slide now. And what I'm going to do is to end the slideshow and then project it again. I hope you can see it, but
yes,
what I'm showing on my screen, okay, thank you. What I'm showing on my screen right now is a study that Deloitte did in 2017 about global human capital trends. Of course, this is probably old now, but it was more the case for building a data-driven culture in human resources. Why it was important to do that, why collaboration was important, the kind of technology that's needed, and very importantly, the team skills that are required to be able to build a data-driven culture in human resources. Now, if I go to the next slide, therefore, what do we need to do? We continue with the case for HR, because again, research has shown, hoping that you can see my screen, 70% of HR executives do agree that HR needs to reinvent itself. And the pandemic, although not a good thing, really gave HR more reason to be and why it needs to reinvent itself even better. And HR is continuing to evolve into data as well. So it's becoming more data driven. It's becoming more of a digital function, because without that, really, there's so many things in terms of employee experience that we will not be able to provide to the business or even help our people to feel that. So for the HR function, therefore, it is important that we understand the need to skill up in terms of data. I'm going to go to the next slide. And in that next slide, I'm not going to speak too much, because the speaker before Peter had talked about the future of HR, critical skills for a data-driven HR. Again, research shows that HR skills for the future showcase some of the most in-demand skills to be around the data area. One thing that I'm just going to talk about is how we use data to influence decisions. And you can see from speaker to speaker throughout today that they've been building on this topic. If we don't have the right data, we will not be able to make the right decisions when it comes to people. So there are very key things that are important to help us drive a more data-oriented HR, as it were. And when we are able to do that as an HR community, then we will be able to influence the change better and support the organization, as it were. Sorry, I have to do this all the time, just to be sure that the slides are advancing. Having said all of that, sometimes as HR people, we might be sitting there wondering, okay, so what do I then do? There's so much coming at me. What do I then do? How can I prioritize, right, people analytics over maybe sales analytics, or maybe marketing analytics, or maybe even financial analytics? How do I make sure I get my own space at the table, as it were, when it comes to all of these analytics? Of course, every business that's worth its salt knows that to get things to happen, really, you need to start with people. And one of this slide just goes to show that we can prioritize looking at what could be high impact, what could be complex, and then we can then prioritize based on what will give us a quick win, what is the big bet that will probably take a longer time for us to achieve, but once achieved, it's really something that we're going to be proud of, about, that's going to step change our processes as far as HR is concerned. What could be things that are trivial, we don't need to focus too much time on, and what could be complex and would take maybe a long time, but it could be a pet project. So we can group this into these four quadrants and see how we organize ourselves when it comes to data. Again, I'm going to, I apologize for having to do this all the time, but I'm nearly there. Then we can discuss some more and go straight into particular slides that you would want to see. So there are focus areas for building a data-driven HR. I have kind of ring-fenced some of them. One of them is people analytics. I remember also in my organization when we were trying to get HR on the cloud, and we wanted to have seamless systems across the globe in my organization so that managers could access people information online real time, and there would be no different legacy systems bumping into each other as the case may be. So we needed to do that, but we needed to make it a business case, and we needed to put the funding and and the noise around that area so that everybody will buy in. Because at the end of the day, managers are the ones that are going to be using these systems, and they will be able to, right from their own desk or from their own system, carry out some basic people analytics. So we did that successfully, and today it is a way of life for us in our organization. We have Power BI tools that we use that help us to do some minimal people analytics or even deeper ones. Also, we have digital HR and HR technology that we are playing in right now in my organization, and then also design thinking. Recently, we needed to crack the problem we had with inclusion and diversity in our organization globally. And one of the things that we had to do was to use design thinking methodology to be able to tease out the problems, the issues that we had, and then also, more importantly, decide the critical few that we needed to focus on that would help us move the needle. All of this is because we had earlier on invested in the tools that were needed to be able to do this. Now, the point here to note is that we do not want to perform people analytics for the sake of it, because it is pleasure alone, or it gives us joy, or it makes HR to feel like, oh yeah, we too were at the table, we have arrived. But rather, it is important work that gives insights that deliver tangible outcomes. And one of the things for my organization that this has done is to put the spotlight on inclusion and diversity. Diversity, equality, and inclusion, DEI activities across the organization from the top to the bottom. It couldn't have been possible without the power of data and the insights that that data gave us. One other thing too is how we manage talent and how we can seamlessly move talents from one geographical location to another across the globe, simply because this information is now widely available amongst hiring managers, and they have a good platform where they can advertise for jobs, and people within the organization, within the Heineken Group, can apply for these jobs, as it were. So people analytics does add value. And here at the bottom there, the bars just show some of the areas where that adds value even more so. I'm not even going to speak about this too much because, like I said, two speakers before, the speaker before Peter had talked about some of the HR metrics, and even Peter had mentioned some of them, but you would look at them when you, at your spare time, as you see the slides later. Now I'm going to go to my last slide, actually. I would just like to talk about some of the things that we've been able to do as an HR community in my organization. And due to the insights that we've received, we've been able to design certain small programs using sprints to have some minimum viable products really ready for our people to use. One of them is medical capitation. In my organization, because we are spread out across the country, different locations, some people, salespeople are in the field, some are in the breweries, in different locations, far-flung areas, north, south, east, and west. It becomes very challenging when you talk about the HMO system and all of that. It becomes very challenging sometimes for people to get the service that they need. But with this solution that has been built using insights and using technology, our people have at their fingertips the ability to escalate issues, to complain, to find the hospitals that are closest to them where they may be. Also, the same thing with accommodation, booking hotels. Instead of having different agreements with different hotels all over the place, we had to come up with a method where we can aggregate everything to have it in one platform so people can find easily. And then, of course, outsourcing automation tool. And the last one I'd like to talk about here is I Am Alive. We are one of the companies that have a closed pension group. Now, with this closed pension group, it means, or organization, it means that we do have pensioners that are old and advanced in years. How do we get to know who is alive, who is well, who is where? Again, we had to develop something that helps them to also indicate without having to leave their homes. They may be old, they may be not too well. Instead of sending them to the banks to go and verify that they are still alive and well, there's an app that they can use to help them. So it makes it easy for them to be able to indicate whether they are alive or they are not alive. And we call it I am alive. So that way, 2 times a year, they indicate that, oh yes, I'm still here, I'm still a pensioner. And that helps us to really check on them very easily. So really, I would like to stop here for discussions. I know that it's been short, and I've tried to not go into too much detail, but I'd like to stop here so that we can discuss even some more. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. You might say it was short, but I think it was a very impactful short session. There was so much that we'll take away from that session. And I've already got a question waiting in the question and answer box. So before I read it, I'd just like to remind everyone, if you have a question, you can drop it in the question and answer box and we would attend to it. So the first one here says, is it possible for an organization to be data-driven while operating manual processes?
That's a very good question, because oftentimes when we talk about data, it's almost as if we're talking only about technology, right? And sometimes technology can be very expensive, particularly depending on the size of the organization. However, let's even unpack what data is. Data is just individual sets of information that we gather. And data in itself may not make sense, right? But when we piece the data together, then it becomes information. When we get the insights out of it and we translate it into a language or into whatever form that people can understand, then it becomes information and gives insight. So in a short form or in a short answer, I can say yes, right? The thing is, though, that with the manual processes, then it becomes a bit more cumbersome. The speed goes out the window because you cannot go fast. It is not agile, it is not scalable. So that's just the thing. But already if you're sitting in your house, for example, as a woman, right? And you look at your pantry, you look at, oh my goodness, my beans has reached the level that I need to replace, my tomatoes, oh my goodness, this is not enough. It's not going to last the next 1 month. That's manual, but then you are getting data. That's going to help you for your shopping list when you go to the market the next time. So yes, that is totally manual. It's totally basic. It's totally what we do every day in the homes. But then in a business setting, therefore, it won't let you take real time that may lie competition right at your backside, and that competition is using something more sophisticated. So the short answer is yes. Long answer is that over time, it probably wouldn't help you too much.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think one example that you shared that showed a good instance of that was the I Am Alive application, which is you had data from a manual process, and that data from the manual process allowed you to automate. And then that data you get from automation allows you to make more improvements in the process. Okay, so the second one I have here says that in a fast-paced organization where speed is key due to fierce competition, data could sometimes be regarded as secondary. How can HR go about motivating for investment into data gathering and analysis tools?
In fact, it would be dicey to consider that the answer to speed would be forget about data. Actually, data helps you to even go faster. That is why it's important to have these foundations of data, have the governance, the data governance, make sure that you're investing in a culture you're building a culture that is data driven, and then make sure that you're also investing in the experts that are going to be able to work on this data and get out the insights that are important, such that at some point it almost becomes automatic and it becomes scalable, then it's going to help you with speed, right? So HR, on the other hand, I will just tell a little story. In a previous employment where I worked, I had just joined when and I told myself, how does that concern me? I need to go for this program that I had booked in Harvard. I'm not going to, I have to go. And they were telling me, no, 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 this is very important. You have to stay. I said, no, 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 I have to go. Anyway, eventually I went. I went for that program. But I went because I told them no when I was discussing this job. I told them specifically and they said I could go and I went. But when I came back, I understood why my presence was so needed. Because as a business leader, not just HR, I was leading a stream, a very small scope, but a very important scope that was at the foundation of ensuring that every other process was operable. Because we needed to set up the people platform first, because everything else was going to ride on that. So that meant that a salesperson, for example, could not sell in his territory if he was not yet created by the HR system, because his devices, his tools would not even work because he was not connected from the system. So that in itself is enough business case for why HR has to have the investment that is necessary when it comes to data. Because without that, even though it was a very small scope at the very beginning, it was absolutely important for all the other fancy systems, so to speak, procurement, procure to pay, order to cash, all of that, because it was all tied to the individual, to the person that works in the organization, having the right accesses, the rights to do the work at the place where they needed to work, even on the shop floor, operating a machine and all of that. So it becomes very important. So the case actually speaks for itself that it is important for HR to be able to do that. And every forward-thinking organization knows that that investment becomes very necessary. On top of that, yeah, exactly. On top of that, other processes then get built. So from that minimal scope, we then eventually the next year scaled up to performance management systems. We now scaled up to Ask HR. We now scaled up to recruitment. We now scaled up to several other things that were riding on this system. But initially it was such a narrow scope, and I was thinking, but I don't have much to do here. But eventually I had the biggest burden in all of it, and I needed to own it from the very beginning. So forward-thinking organizations know well to make that investment when it comes to HR.
Thank you so much for that. So one thing that popped in my head as we were speaking is speed is of no importance if you're heading in the wrong direction. So, so business needs data to know where to go. Okay, so the next question I have here says that sometimes data is regarded as historical and things change fast. How can we make data meaningful for future impact?
Very important. It then depends on how scalable that data is and the point at which you're collecting the data. So what we want to do is to make sure that you're collecting data real time. And that is why you come back again to making sure that you have systems in place or the technology, the right technology to be able to collect that data. And that is where technology will trump the manual data collection process. Because yes, if you're using a manual system, it's going to get stale even the very next minute. But if you're using technology, then it becomes dynamic. So as it changes, you are capturing that change at the moment. So I'll give you another example. A couple of years ago, we installed some systems in the premises of some of our customers, right? These systems were actually to help collect data. And they were collecting data of things that they were selling in their shop. So everything, not just our own products, but everything that they sold in their shop, right? With this system, it enabled us collect our information, right? How much of our products are being sold. And it helps us to be able to decide the reorder levels for these individuals. It helps us to also know when to support them, when to prompt them to say, maybe you need to make a fresh order. We're going to help you in this way or that way. But the result of that was that these people were telling us that because of that system that we installed with them, pilferage had reduced or even stopped. They could tell when their shop, their workers pilfered their products, because then the stock gets entered, immediately as it is received. And then from then on, they see how the stock is moving. So they could tell when people stole the stuff. And these people didn't know that from that system, you could tell when things have been stolen. So they were thanking us so much for helping them to reduce pilferage, to reduce theft in their stores. That, oh my goodness, why didn't you bring this system before now? But that helps you to capture information right there and then. And then the second step is, how do you then manage this information? How do you then treat the data such that it now gives you the insights that you require to make the decisions that you need? So again, investment is required in that, in such a system, so that you have this almost real time, so to speak. Of course, hindsight is 20/20 vision, right? It's only when you have that you have perfect vision. But at least with what you have now, what you know now, you can make bold projections for the future. And then that's where courage then becomes important. How can you courageously say, with what I know now, with everything around me, I will go as a business? That takes courage too. So it's not as if data in itself is the be all and end all, but it is a great enabler to, getting closer to your customer or to your consumer.
Thank you so much for that. And when you mentioned that, one of the things that Shola talked about was also understanding where we were, which was looking backwards. So data tells you where you were, so it's a bit historical. Then it tells you why you are here. So you can then use that as a basis to move forward. Thank you so much. I don't think we have any more questions, but thank you. Someone in the chat room says, thank you for this session. It says that practical insights. So thank you so much. It was really nice having you on the session once again.
Thank you too. It was a pleasure being here. Thanks a lot.